Okay, the shop is called Works Engineering. We are a vintage motorcycle shop. We do repairs. We race motorcycles. We build motorcycles. We modify motorcycles. Gabe over here is the head mechanic, head builder. He's in charge of running all the other mechanics, and also the creative force behind what the bikes are going to look like once we build them.
For most of the customs and stuff that's coming in now, we also do service and restoration, but a lot of people in the neighborhood, and as motorcycles get more popular, more people are coming to us with custom projects. So we're trying to push that and do kind of cooler stuff and use the race heritage and Eric's knowledge on that stuff to build bikes that look good but also actually run good and can perform well.
Well, Gabe's been here a couple years now, so he's pretty new to the shop. But I started the shop back in probably 1999 in a part of Brooklyn called Dumbo. I was in an old warehouse space there and started very small. I used to work for a company that raced motorcycles, vintage motorcycles, called Team Obsolete. And I learned all of my knowledge from the people there. And then decided to work on my own stuff and for customers. And so I went from Dumbo, was there probably 5-6 years, and then moved to Williamsburg back in early 2000s, 2003. And I've been in different parts of the neighborhood since then. So about 12 years I've been here. So I started in Brooklyn because I worked in Brooklyn. The company I worked for and that I learned from was in Brooklyn. And it's a diverse community. I like all the people. Because it's diverse, there's also a diverse set of tastes, and the motorcycles that are here, it's not all Japanese, it's not all German, it's not all Italian. There's a little bit of everything, and I like diversity.
It's also probably cheap.
And it's cheaper.
Really?
Right.
It used to be,
At the time, it's cheap.
Yeah. Right. It used to be fairly inexpensive to be in Brooklyn, but now it's equalized with Manhattan, so it's a little different now. Eventually we'll be priced out of this neighborhood and we'll have to go to maybe Bushwick or upstate New York or Canada maybe even. That was a joke. So yeah, that's why I like Brooklyn, yeah. This business in particular doesn't really make money. It's more a passion. We're doing this because we want to do it. We like doing it. At least for me, it's not making money. I try to keep all my employees somewhat happy and making money so they can live here. But for me, it's not a money-making thing. I actually have 3 other businesses that make money and that allow me to have this business. I have a couple of restaurants and bars, and that's where I make my money, and therefore can afford to stay here. And
I think that's the case in the motorcycle industry, or is it just in New York?
I think that for vintage bikes, it might be.
It's really hard.
It's very hard to make money.
It's you're dealing with bikes that are really old, and balancing that between customers' expectations. You need a lot of people buy an old bike for $500, and they want it to run for maybe, I don't know,
$200.
$200 more. But in the end, it's reality. No matter whether it's a Honda or a Rare Matchless, it's the same amount of money and time to get it to be in the right spot to be a reliable bike, and that costs money. And most of the time, it costs more money than the bike is worth. So you have to have a special customer who cares enough to want to put the money into having that bike be what it should be. And so it's really hard. So you got to be really, really clear with people about what they're getting and what they're paying for. And a lot of times it's hard to make that balance work. So with the custom stuff, it's at least they're getting something that's completely different from the original bike, and so the value is in this other version of that bike. So hopefully there's worth there, but even then it's hard, if not harder, to make money on those builds because of a huge amount of time and planning and labor that goes into making something work and create it, fabricate everything. And we make a lot of our own stuff here, and it just takes time, and it's hard to make money on those bikes that are worth $3,000 without charging someone $20,000 to get it done. So The people who have come when I met Eric and I mean I didn't plan on working here. I was just looking for a temporary job. I was working for another shop in Texas, and I was gonna go back down there.
So what kind of shop did you work before coming?
It was like pretty high end, custom, vintage restoration shop. And so I was planning, but I was living in New York, and I'd just gone down there to try to feel out if I wanted to live in Texas and get away from New York because it was so expensive here. And I found these guys, and I really liked what they were doing, and I wanted to work with them. But there was just a lot of ego and attitude, and they were really about money. They cared a lot about money, and it was all about the money, the money, the money. And using bikes to create a brand, and then the brand would make the money, which is smart in some ways. But when I started here, I just needed a temporary job. I had a broken shoulder, and so I was here getting better. And I came in to help a friend with a bike that he had here, and I fixed it. And the manager at the time offered me a job, and I told him I only had one arm. And he was like, "It's fine, we'll get people to help you." So as soon as I kind of got involved and like started to meet Eric and the other people who were part of kind of the family that is part of this building, I totally fell in love with being here. And then I got to work on amazing bikes and be around people who I really enjoyed being around, and that was worth more to me than the money, even though we still try to push to make as much money as we can within that tight spot. But yeah, it's definitely, we've had a lot of people come and go, and first thing I tell people when they want to work here is you have to want to work here. That's basically it, because it's where no one's in it for the money. Can't be, because it's just not, for the way society works right now, it's not the way to make a lucrative business, time versus cash. So.
But I've from the place that I used to work at, I've known several Japanese magazines that were very interested in this team that I used to work for. It's called Team Obsolete, and there was a couple of big magazines. One was called Motorcyclist, one was called Clubman. They're beautiful. All the magazines and the quality of the journalism in Japan is just crazy, way much better than what we have here in the United States. And so I always can see that in the Japanese people have a big passion for creating things like that. I think the only other place I've seen that is the Italians. They have similar magazine quality and just like choices or passion about what they do, whether it's motorcycles or clothing or things like that. And so there's like a similarity there, and we kind of
respect for the culture too,
right?
Instead of the commodity, right. more about what the people are doing instead of the object, which is I appreciate.
I think that I appreciate the old design more than the new design. The new design tries to cover up a lot of the engineering. The engineering, which I also have a passion for, is amazing what they do nowadays, but it doesn't look so nice. So I just appreciate the old designs and forms, mostly of the 50s and 60s and a little bit of the 70s. I mean, I think that was like I guess the golden era of motorcycle design. But engineering-wise, in the 80s and 90s, they made major advances, and I think I really love that part of motorcycling, but it just doesn't look as nice. They really, the design took a turn for the worse in the 80s and 90s. And even now, it's definitely, there's some nice bikes out there, but it's more about the engineering now that is so great. I love working with my hands. I love trying to figure out how something is made, how something works, how something functions. I went to engineering school, so I'm always trying to figure out how things work. You take it apart, you put it back together. And I feel like do-it-yourself is about that learning about how the world works, and also save money.
Yeah, that's my definition of that would be, I grew up with very little money and we couldn't afford to do things, but I found out that if I learned how to do it myself, I could keep up with other people who, I can ride a vintage bike, because I know how to work on it, as opposed to a lot of our customers can ride them because they can afford to pay someone to keep it up and keep it going. I have a 49 Chevy panel truck that's outside that like I couldn't, if I were to buy that outright, it wouldn't be what it was, you know. And it's also like everything you do it yourself. It's a reward that just you can't pay for. There's no money out there, and it's one of those things where I learned at a young age, if I did something myself, I would probably mess it up the first time, and the second time I'd probably get it right, and the third time I'd be really good at it. And it was always the same amount of money, except more time to do that, and then I'd know it for the rest of my life than to
and the quality. You know the quality.
Yeah, you're in control of everything.
Sometimes you bring something to somebody and they don't care about the way the work is done. So do it yourself also means that you have quality to the product that you create. I grew up in Germany, and my dad was an engineer, and he used to make everything himself. Furniture. He made computers when they first started. He made his own computer, and I love just playing around making things. And he fostered that in me, that it's something that you can do. So I think it's handed down from my father mostly. How about you?
My interest in, when I was growing up, I grew up in San Diego in Southern California, and I was surrounded, my dad was in a lowrider club when I was a little kid, so I was always around lowriders, which were like old vintage cars that were just painted, you know, immaculately, and they would jump up and down, and I was always fascinated by that stuff. And when I was growing up, everyone was around me was like, don't ever be a mechanic, don't ever be a construction worker, don't ever do this, do that, go to school, get a job and work on computers or something like that. And when I got out of high school, I tried to go to school for just to get into education and started going towards art. And in the end, I realized that the only thing that made me happy was working on motorcycles, building stuff, doing construction, all the stuff that I had been doing to support myself, to be able to go to school, to supposed to get this other job.
Do it yourself.
But then in the end, it was like I was doing what I wanted to do anyway. Unfortunately, there's not as much money in it. You can be if you really, get on the business side of things. But so I think maybe that influence of being around these amazing objects that people had all done themselves, in that time, in that community. If you were building lowriders, you were mostly part of a Mexican community that was not a lot of money, and also kind of in a society that was kind of not respecting them as a culture in California, because there's a lot of immigration issues, and it was kind of like a lot of racial tension. And so I always felt like that was a way of reclaiming their identity through their machines. And so they could receive power through society by making these amazing machines. So I always respected that, and I ended up dropping out of an art career to do this stuff because I felt it was more powerful in terms of making something that would give to people and give to me back. So